Robert Irwin stepped onto the set expecting the same respectful curiosity he'd gotten from every other talk show, but the room told a different story the second he appeared. The applause felt forced, the host unusually stiff, and Joy Behar's smile looked less welcoming and more like someone waiting to spring a trap. Robert, raised to be gracious no matter the setting, greeted everyone with his usual calm charm, completely unaware he'd walked straight into a setup. Joy wasted no time. She introduced him with a tone far too sweet to be sincere, and then immediately stripped away any pretense of friendliness. She leaned in, eyes sharp, and asked why he deserved the attention he was getting. Like, before we move on, don't forget to hit subscribe button. "Isn't all of this just your father's legacy carrying you?" she pressed, dismissing his achievements as though they were stage props. The studio froze. Robert held his posture, but there was a flicker, quick, controlled, but unmistakable. He'd heard variations of this question for years, but never delivered with this level of hostility. He responded professionally, listing the work he'd done since childhood: rescues, conservation programs, breeding efforts, field research. It didn't matter. Joy pushed harder. She accused him of imitation, of hiding behind Steve Irwin's legend, of lacking originality. With every line she delivered, the audience sank deeper into discomfort. Even Whoopi looked ready to intervene, but Joy kept pressing, convinced she could break him. Robert inhaled slowly, and that's when the shift happened. The smile vanished. The polite media mask came off, replaced by something steadier and far more dangerous. Real anger held under iron control. When he spoke, his voice had weight. He told her exactly what playing with animals actually meant. He described pulling terrified wildlife from burning forests, helping save species that had vanished from regions for decades, and watching his father take bites and stings while protecting both animals and people. He reminded her that conservation isn't a costume or a brand, it's a relentless responsibility carried long after cameras stop rolling. Joy, misreading his restraint as weakness, made her biggest mistake. She told him emotion didn't equal merit. She dismissed everything he said as sentimental noise and insisted he was famous only because of his last name. She even suggested he should find a real career, as if the work he did had no value beyond nostalgia. Robert went completely still, the kind of stillness predators recognize before impact. He stared directly at her, not with hostility, but with the clarity of someone who has finally run out of patience. He told her legacy isn't a crutch, it's a standard. He said he didn't inherit fame, he inherited responsibility, danger, and a lifelong duty to creatures that can't defend themselves. And he made it brutally clear that everything he has achieved came from work, not borrowed glory. The audience didn't cheer, they didn't breathe. The moment felt like something breaking. Joy's confidence, the show's usual rhythm, the illusion that she could push anyone without consequences. For once, the panel had nothing to add. Joy had tried to humiliate him, and instead she exposed her own ignorance. Robert didn't raise his voice, he didn't insult her. He simply reminded everyone watching that real credibility isn't manufactured on television. It's earned in fire, sweat, and danger, far from the comfort of a studio chair. And in that silence, Joy finally understood she hadn't cornered a polite kid in khakis. She had provoked someone who grew up facing creatures far more dangerous than a daytime host with a sharp tongue. What came next wasn't outrage. It was control so sharp it felt like the air in the studio thinned. Robert leaned back, no longer defensive, no longer trying to please anyone. He spoke with the steadiness of someone who had spent his entire life around danger and learned that panic never wins. He told Joy that carrying his father's legacy wasn't a burden. It was an obligation he accepted fully. He explained that the real weight of his work isn't the comparisons. It's the animals dying in habitats shrinking faster than conservationists can save them. As he spoke, the audience's discomfort morphed into respect. Even the crew behind the cameras looked stunned because they weren't watching a kid crumble. They were watching a young man command a room that had been designed to break him. Joy tried to regain control with a sarcastic laugh, the kind she uses when she wants to paint someone else as irrational. But the reaction didn't land. Instead of shifting the audience back to her side, it exposed how shaken she actually was. She wasn't expecting resistance, much less a challenge delivered with precision instead of emotional collapse. Robert continued, unrelenting but calm. He told her the Irwin name wasn't a shortcut. It was a promise made to species disappearing, to ecosystems collapsing, to people who rely on conservation programs for their livelihoods. He described the nights spent in wildlife hospitals, the field work that takes him into territories where one mistake can end a life, the animals that die in his arms before he can save them. None of that, he said, happens because of fame. It happens because he shows up. Joy tried to interrupt again, but this time Whoopi placed a hand on the table. A silent signal that enough was enough. For the first time in a long time, the hierarchy on the set shifted. Joy wasn't in control. She had provoked something real, something powerful, and now the entire room was watching her scramble to regain footing that no longer existed. Robert turned toward the audience, not dramatically, but like someone choosing to address the people who mattered. He said every conservationist lives with doubt. Doubt about time, resources, global policies, the speed of environmental collapse. But the work continues because quitting means everything dies faster. He told them he didn't choose wildlife. It chose him, not because of fame, but because he grew up surrounded by creatures most people only see on screens. He learned early that every life saved requires 10 failures before the breakthrough. He said none of that disappears simply because someone on a talk show wants to belittle it. The audience responded, not with applause, but with a low murmur of agreement. The kind that fills a room when people realize they've misjudged someone. Joy's expression hardened. Her plan had derailed, and the silence wasn't sympathy for her, it was judgment. She forced a smile and tried to redirect with a joke about kids needing to toughen up these days. But the comment fell flat. Robert didn't even dignify it with a reaction. Instead, he explained that conservation demands a toughness far beyond studio debates. It demands facing death, destruction, and heartbreak, yet waking up each morning ready to do it again. He said he wasn't afraid of criticism because his work doesn't depend on public approval. It depends on survival. The moment he finished, the audience applauded. Not politely, but decisively. Not because he performed, but because truth delivered with clarity cuts through everything. Joy sat frozen for a split second, confronted with a reality she didn't intend to create. She had offered him a platform to fail, and he turned it into a platform to rise. Even the producers backstage, known for feeding chaos to boost ratings, seemed to sense that this confrontation had crossed lines they couldn't easily walk back. Robert's final message wasn't directed at Joy, it was directed at the millions watching. He said that anyone who thinks conservation is a child's game should try holding a dying animal knowing you're its last chance. He said legacy isn't a shadow, it's a torch, and the only people who fear torches are those who stand too close to their own darkness. Then he thanked the audience, thanked the crew, and, without waiting for the usual scripted banter, stood up. It wasn't a walkout, it was a statement, a clean, controlled refusal to remain in a space where good faith wasn't offered, and that exit hit harder than anything he had said. The moment Robert stepped off the stage, the studio atmosphere snapped. The applause faded into an awkward vacuum, and for the first time all episode, Joy Behar's confidence cracked. She looked toward the producers with a tight, irritated expression, half expecting someone to rescue her, half realizing there was no easy way to undo what just happened. Whoopi exhaled so loudly her mic picked it up, leaning back in her chair with a look that said exactly what everyone else was thinking. Joy had pushed too far, and now the damage was public. The audience began murmuring, not in confusion, but in a collective judgment that even Joy couldn't pretend to ignore. She tried to smooth it over with a brittle laugh, insisting the show would continue as usual, but nothing about the room felt usual anymore. She had gone after a young man who built his life around compassion, danger, and responsibility, and he responded with a level of maturity that made her look small. Behind the scenes, the tension exploded. Producers rushed toward Robert as he walked backstage, trying to reassure him the segment had gone great, even though they knew damn well it had turned into a PR nightmare. He brushed them off politely but firmly, refusing to let anyone spin what had happened into entertainment. He had come to talk conservation, not participate in a spectacle of disrespect. While Robert moved toward his dressing room, Joy stormed backstage, insisting she had every right to challenge him. Her voice carried down the hallway, loud enough that the crew winced. She claimed she was simply doing her job, but no one bought it. Not after the way she'd attacked his credibility, his career, and his identity. Meanwhile, social media detonated. Clips of the confrontation hit Twitter and TikTok before the commercial break ended. Viewers weren't just upset, they were furious. People accused Joy of bullying, belittling real work, and embarrassing the show. Wildlife experts chimed in, defending Robert's contributions and calling Joy's comments ignorant. Even celebrities known for staying out of daytime drama started weighing in, praising Robert for handling hostility with integrity. Within minutes, the trending tab was filled with variations of "Leave Robert alone," "Joy Behar bullies conservationist," and "Steve Irwin would be proud." Back in the dressing room, Robert sat quietly, decompressing. He wasn't angry, he was disappointed. He traveled the world risking injury to protect ecosystems collapsing under human pressure, and yet he had just spent 10 minutes defending the legitimacy of his life's work to someone who had never set foot in a conservation zone. His sister Bindi called almost immediately, her voice tight with concern. She'd already seen the clip online. She told him their father never backed down from confrontation, but he also never let cruelty derail the mission. "You handled it the right way," she said. "You protected the work, not the image." That mattered to Robert more than anything. While he spoke to her, a producer knocked on the door, begging him to return for the final wrap-up segment. They claimed it would balance the episode, but Robert saw it for what it was: damage control designed to save Joy, not acknowledge the real issue. He declined, calmly, simply, completely. When he stepped out to leave, crew members approached him one by one, apologizing for the ambush without ever using the word ambush. They told him privately what they couldn't admit on air. Joy had come in that morning complaining that the show was getting too soft and that she wanted a segment with real bite. She chose him because she assumed he'd fold. Instead, he held the line. Outside the studio, paparazzi swarmed, expecting a meltdown or a soundbite. Instead, Robert spoke about conservation, habitat loss, climate emergencies, nothing about Joy, and that infuriated her more than any insult could have. By the time the episode finished taping, executives were already in meetings discussing the fallout. Joy's behavior wasn't new, but this time she targeted someone who had no scandal, no agenda, no ego, just a mission. And audiences don't forgive unnecessary cruelty towards someone genuinely trying to do good. Across the world, fans of Steve Irwin rallied, posting clips of Robert's fieldwork, rescues, and research projects to drown out the negativity. They reminded everyone that the Irwins have dedicated their lives to protecting species most people never even think about. Robert watched the response quietly from his hotel later that night. He didn't enjoy the outrage on his behalf. He wasn't wired that way, but he understood why people reacted the way they did. Joy hadn't exposed his weakness, she exposed her own. For Robert, the moment was already over. He had more important things waiting: animals needing care, habitats needing restoration, people needing hope. He closed his phone, packed his gear, and prepared to fly out for his next conservation shoot at sunrise. While Joy spent the night defending herself online, Robert did what he always did: he got ready to work. By the next morning, the situation had mutated from a TV segment controversy into a full-blown media firestorm. News outlets, podcasts, and even international networks were replaying the confrontation, dissecting every second of Joy's comments. Headlines range from blunt to brutal. Joy Behar attacks young conservationist. Robert Irwin shows more poise than entire panel. The View faces backlash over disrespect. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Joy had tried to question his legitimacy, but her meltdown ended up amplifying his mission louder than any promotional tour could have. Meanwhile, the show's producers were scrambling, calling emergency meetings before they even walked into the building. They weren't worried about Joy. She'd survived scandals before. They were worried about advertisers. Their inboxes were full of statements from sponsors demanding clarification, some even requesting to distance themselves from the segment. When money gets spooked, networks listen fast. And this time, the backlash wasn't partisan, demographic, or niche. It was universal. Parents, teachers, environmental groups, wildlife organizations, and even political commentators agreed. Robert didn't deserve what he got. Inside the studio, tension simmered. Joy arrived pretending nothing was wrong, brushing past staff with the confidence of someone who had convinced herself the world was overreacting. But the moment she entered the makeup room, the chill was impossible to ignore. The crew, who usually laughed at her jokes, worked silently. Production assistants avoided eye contact. Even the makeup artist stayed strictly professional. No chit-chat, no warmth. Joy pretended not to notice, but her reflection betrayed her. For the first time, she looked unsure. Whoopi arrived next, and she didn't bother with politeness. She told Joy directly that yesterday crossed the line, that the audience felt it, the staff felt it, and the network felt it. Joy fired back defensively, insisting Robert needed to be challenged. Whoopi shut that down instantly. Challenge the work, not the person, and don't confuse cruelty with journalism. It was the kind of confrontation Joy wasn't used to, one she couldn't out-talk or steamroll. While that tension was brewing, Robert was already thousands of miles away. He had landed in Queensland, stepping off the plane into humidity, birdsong, and the familiar scent of eucalyptus. The chaos of television felt like a different universe. Waiting for him were rangers and veterinarians preparing for a week of rescue missions tied to recent heat waves. There was no time time for reflection. Animals were already suffering. While the world debated talk show ethics, Robert was knee-deep in scorched terrain searching for dehydrated wildlife. Cameras followed, not studio cameras, but documentary crews capturing real work. The struggle to save species collapsing under climate pressure. Every time he lifted an injured animal, every time he coordinated a release or treatment, clips went viral again. This time not because of drama, but because people saw what Joy tried to minimize: the intensity, danger, and seriousness of his mission. Meanwhile, the View's executives issued a public statement meant to calm the storm, one of those sterile paragraphs that tries to say everything and nothing at once. But viewers weren't buying it. Comments flooded their social pages by the tens of thousands, calling for an apology. Not from the show, from Joy. Even celebrities who normally avoided daytime politics weighed in again, praising Robert for his composure. Some even hinted that Joy's approach represented everything wrong with modern media: performative confrontation masquerading as substance. Back in Australia, Robert returned to the wildlife hospital late that night. Exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, he checked on a wallaby Joey he had rescued earlier in the day. Watching it stabilize reminded him why his work mattered, and it made Joy's comments feel even more absurd. His phone buzzed. It was an invitation from multiple major networks requesting interviews to clarify the incident. He declined all of them. He wasn't interested in dragging the conflict out. He wasn't interested in playing the media game Joy lived in. Instead, he posted a single message, a photo of him holding the rescued Joey with the caption, "This is the work. This is what matters." The response was explosive. Millions engaged, not with outrage, but with admiration. It shifted the narrative completely. The story was no longer about Joy attacking him. It was about Robert refusing to be dragged into noise when real problems needed his attention. Back in New York, the fallout became impossible to ignore. Joy's agent called her in a panic, warning her that the network wanted a private meeting. Ratings analysts had already flagged the episode as one of the most negatively received in the show's history. Advertisers were demanding either an on-air apology or a guarantee that similar ambush segments wouldn't happen again. Joy tried to play it off, claiming the public was being dramatic, but deep down, she knew the numbers didn't lie. This wasn't a blip, this was damage, and she wasn't in control of the cleanup. By evening, executives officially requested a sit-down meeting with her before the next taping. Joy interpreted it as a nuisance, but the people around her, staff, crew, even panelists, recognized what it really was: the beginning of consequences. Because you can push many guests and get away with it, but not a kid carrying the weight of a global conservation legacy, and definitely not someone who refused to fight back with toxicity, choosing instead to answer disrespect with